My name is Margaret. I bake. That's what I tell people when they ask what I do, though it's never been a job. It's just the thing I return to when I can't make sense of the world. Flour, eggs, sugar, heat. Predictable, controllable. I baked for the church for years. Baked for the chemo nurses when Robert was sick. Baked through the sleepless months after my mastectomy, when I didn't know how to be a woman without breasts. I baked through the worst of it, and I baked for him when he came home. 40 years. 40 years of casseroles, forgiveness, and holding hands in waiting rooms. So when the funeral came, it made sense that I baked for that too. I made 3 casseroles. Tuna noodle, chicken divan, and his favorite, baked ziti with extra parmesan on top. I remember standing in our kitchen, the silence of widowhood already thick around me like a second skin, pressing down as I stirred the sauce. I couldn't cry. Couldn't even speak. Just mixed and layered and sprinkled, because cooking for someone is loving them, even after they're gone. I watched the cheese bubble in the oven and told myself this was closure. This was grace. This was the right thing. I remember thinking that as I wrapped the warm dishes in foil and brought them to the church. I even remember smiling a little when people complimented the flavor. What I don't remember, at least not clearly, is the moment I saw her. Let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Philip Gray from Alabama. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. She was sitting at the back of the reception hall, hands folded tightly on her lap, like someone not quite sure she belonged. Early 50s maybe, soft eyes, cardigan buttoned all the way up. I noticed her because she looked like she was trying not to be noticed, and I've always been good at spotting the ones who don't want to be seen. Beside her were 2 young adults, late teens or early 20s. A boy and a girl. Clean, well-behaved. Too quiet for their age. They looked like they were trying to blend into the wallpaper. I figured maybe they were from Robert's old job. He worked in finance for decades. There were always faces I didn't recognize at those kinds of things. Still, when I brought them plates of food, she thanked me like I'd handed her oxygen. Her hand trembled when she reached for the casserole. It was 3 days later when the phone rang. I was folding Robert's sweaters, which I hadn't been able to bring myself to donate yet. I still caught his scent on the collar, cedar and that strange aftershave he always bought from the drugstore. The voice on the phone was calm, professional. A man from the bank. He was calling about the second mortgage, he said. I must have been silent too long because he asked if I was still on the line. I told him I had no idea what he was talking about. We paid off our house 20 years ago. He paused as if double-checking something. Then he said the documents were all signed in my name. 5 years ago. A new mortgage. Several cash withdrawals since then. Significant ones. Drained to nothing, actually. I told him there had to be a mistake. He told me he'd send the paperwork. I sat down on the kitchen floor. Not the chair, not the couch. The floor. Cold linoleum. It was the only thing that felt solid beneath me. I remember staring at the spice rack, counting the jars like I used to when Robert was in surgery. Basil. Thyme. Paprika. Rosemary. He always joked that I had a witch's cabinet. Too many herbs for one woman. I kept thinking there's a logical explanation. It's fraud. Identity theft. He would never. He held my hand when I vomited blood. He kissed my scars. But the envelope arrived the next morning, and my signature was perfect, curled in all the same places. My maiden name listed as secondary. My social security number. My handwriting. My trust. I called our son. I tried to say the words out loud, but I couldn't. I asked if he could come by next week to help sort through his dad's things. I didn't tell him I'd already started. I didn't tell him I wasn't looking for memories. I was looking for the truth. I stayed up that night digging through the lockbox Robert kept in the back of the closet. Birth certificates, tax returns, copies of deeds. But buried beneath the old insurance files, I found something else. A printed bank statement. It was recent, just a few months before he died. A different account number. Not our joint one. Not listed anywhere in our records. The balance was down to almost nothing. But I traced the last withdrawals. One of them matched a tuition payment to a local community college. Another matched a rent transfer. The recipient's name was hers. The woman from the funeral. I went back through the guest book. She hadn't signed it. Neither had the young adults with her. But I remembered her face. I remembered the way she had touched the casserole dish with both hands, like it meant something. I remembered the way she looked at me, not sad, not sorry, guilty, and somehow grateful. It was the kind of expression you give someone when they're doing something for you that you know they wouldn't, if they only knew the truth. The next morning I got in my car. I didn't take anything with me. Not my purse, not my phone. Just the chicken divan I'd frozen in the weeks before he passed, the one he never got to eat. I drove for an hour, heart pounding, hands shaking, following the address on the bank transfer.
À qui est cul-de-sac?
Middle-class comfort. Blue shutters. A small ceramic angel by the porch. I walked up the driveway with the casserole in my hands like it was an offering. The daughter opened the door. Up close, I saw Robert's chin on her face. His eyes. I smiled and told her I had something for them. She hesitated, then stepped aside. The woman came into view. Her face drained when she saw me. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I stepped inside, handed her the dish and said, "He always liked it with extra cheese." Then I turned and walked away. And I swear to you I didn't cry. Not even once. I didn't cry until the drive home when I realized I had made that casserole with love. And I had fed it to strangers who called my husband Dad. Grief makes you invisible in a way that's socially acceptable. Nobody questions it when you vanish. They call it taking time, processing, letting yourself feel. But I wasn't feeling much of anything. I just needed the silence. After that night, after the casserole, the phone stopped ringing. I unplugged it. I stopped answering texts, stopped checking mail. My son left voicemails that sounded increasingly concerned. "Just checking in, Mom. You don't have to call back, just let me know you're okay." I never responded. I think he assumed I was falling apart. Truth was, I'd never been so awake. Just not in a way the world could recognize. I stopped going to church first. Then the book club. Then the market I'd gone to for 30 years, where I used to chat with the butcher and ask about his daughter's piano recitals. I went to the big store across town now, where the cashiers don't ask your name, where no one notices what you're buying. I liked that. Like the way anonymity pressed against me like a second skin. I cleared out Robert's side of the closet next. Not out of anger, out of calculation. I boxed everything methodically, labeling each one. Winter suits, watches, miscellaneous. I listed it all for donation. Except the box I didn't label. That one I slid under the guest bed and didn't open again for 3 weeks. I didn't look at the poetry at first. I told myself it wasn't important, just old scraps, sentimental. But it gnawed at me. I kept thinking about those lines he used to whisper to me when I couldn't sleep. "Do I dare disturb the universe?" He said he'd written them for me. Said he used to scribble verse in college. I believed it. I always believed him. Until I found the printed email, folded neatly behind one of his poetry notebooks. Dated years ago. From him to her. Started with the same line. Ended with "I love you."
No signature. No explanation.
But it was the exact poem. The exact one he read to me when I was hooked up to IVs, telling me I was still beautiful without hair. He gave it to both of us. Just like everything else. That night I made myself a drink. One of his. Scotch neat. I lit a candle. Sat at the dining table in the dark. It was quiet, so quiet it hurt. I thought about the time he painted the ceiling for me even though he was terrified of ladders. I thought about the time he left a note in my lunchbox before my first chemo, telling me he'd be strong for both of us. I thought about how he used to trace my spine while I slept. Then I thought about tuition payments, rent transfers, duplicate poems. I thought about her cardigan fully buttoned. I thought about that girl's face, our daughter's face, opening the door with no idea who I was. When you've spent 4 decades loving someone, hate doesn't arrive all at once. Comes in layers. At first it's disbelief. Then it's nausea. Then quietly, slowly it becomes clarity. And clarity I've found is colder than hate. I started making lists. Not dramatic ones. Not revenge fantasies. Just inventories. The deed. The accounts. The pension. The retirement portfolio. The automatic withdrawals. I started printing everything I could find. I ordered copies of financial statements going back 10 years. I bought a shredder. I shredded nothing. Instead, I started building a binder. labeled tabs, color-coded. Facts. Just facts. He was methodical. But he'd forgotten something important. He left all the keys with me. People talk about moving on like it's a staircase you climb. But for me it was more like a tunnel. I started to disappear in ways even I didn't notice at first. I wore quieter clothes. Let my hair go gray without dye. Changed the route I walked every morning. Cancelled our country club membership. Sold my wedding ring on a Tuesday afternoon to a man who never looked me in the eye. Said he could give me $1,200 for the gold, $100 more for the diamond. I nodded. Took the cash. Bought a storage unit. Began moving things into it at night. First just a few boxes, then more. Every casserole dish. Every monogram towel. All of it. I didn't know what I was saving it for. I just knew I didn't want to leave it behind. The moment I knew I was truly changing was when I told my son I didn't want a memorial bench. He offered it gently, so sweetly. By the lake, he said. Dad loved that place. I told him no.
No plaqué. No bench.
No place to visit. He sounded hurt, but I didn't explain. I couldn't. Because what I wanted was not a place to remember Robert, but a place where he could no longer be remembered. At least, not as the man he pretended to be. I started cleaning the house like a crime scene. Not with anger. With care. Gloves. Trash bags. Precision. I packed the photo albums. I left our wedding picture on the wall, but only because I needed to remind myself what it looked like. The face of a man who could live two lives and still make you feel like you were the only one. I stopped calling him my husband in my mind. Started referring to him as Robert. It helped. Created distance. Took the air out of the myth. When I finally opened the unlabeled box, I found something I didn't expect. A receipt. Old. Curled. From a jewelry store in Vermont. I hadn't been to Vermont in 20 years. It was dated 5 years ago, same week as our anniversary. Necklace. Sapphire. Different billing address. I folded it gently, placed it in a new folder. Labeled breadcrumbs. The worst part? I still missed him. Still caught myself wanting to tell him things. That the lilies bloomed early. That the neighbor's dog had puppies. That I found his old cufflinks. It was a grief I couldn't explain to anyone because it wasn't just mourning a person. It was mourning being known. And now I wasn't sure anyone had ever truly known me at all. Least of all him. But I was beginning to know him. The real him. The man behind the poetry and the casseroles and the long walks after church. And the more I saw him clearly, the more I began to see myself. The woman I used to be. The woman I was becoming. I wasn't lost. I wasn't breaking down. I was clearing space. I just needed a little more time. Started with a pie. Apple-spiced homemade crust. Not for a funeral this time. Just a neighbor who'd broken her wrist. I knocked on her door, smiled politely, and handed it over. She called me an angel. I told her I just liked baking. That was true. But what I didn't tell her was that I needed practice. Needed to see if I could walk into someone's life with a dessert and be trusted, accepted, absorbed into the fabric of their ordinary day without suspicion. I needed to test how close I could get to a stranger's kitchen and still disappear without leaving a ripple. Because soon, I wasn't going to be baking for neighbors. I was going to be baking for them. Their names were Susan, Hannah, and Eric. I learned that from the community college's online donor portal. One of Robert's last transactions had gone through as a tuition gift under Family Supporter. A small scholarship fund set up in Hannah's name. Public record. I found her on social media next. Smiling in a yellow sweater, standing beside her Uncle Rob, at a charity event from 4 years ago. Same eyes. Same jaw. His jaw. I knew then without question. She was his daughter. Not figuratively. Biologically. He had raised her. Been there. Taken photos. Paid tuition. Attended graduations. While I was sitting beside 4 poles and radiation machines, he was clapping in auditoriums and taking pictures of sunsets with his other family. And the part that chilled me wasn't that he did it. It was how easily he did both, without missing a step in either life. But I didn't want to ruin them. That might sound strange, but it's true. What I wanted was to remove him from everything he'd infected. To untangle his legacy from their lives and mine. To reclaim what he gave away behind my back. Not to punish but to correct. He was gone. And they were still living off a lie I had been forced to pay for. So I put on a cardigan. I dyed my hair a soft chestnut. I chose a new name, Margie, like my grandmother. It was close enough to respond to, far enough not to recognize. And then I walked right into their world, one Tupperware at a time. Susan was easier than I expected. She was lonely. Grief made her raw and overly grateful. She assumed I was just another one of those kind-hearted churchwomen who check in on widows. I baked something every week. I asked if she needed help with mail, grocery errands, her water heater. She welcomed it. She told me how much she missed Rob. How he used to read to her at night. How he made the best scrambled eggs. How she always loved the way he ironed his shirts. I nodded and smiled. I didn't tell her I had taught him how to iron. I didn't tell her he burned holes through 3 of my favorite blouses before he got it right. I didn't tell her I used to spoon-feed him soup during chemo while he whispered poems into my ear. Instead, I brought banana bread and asked questions. Little ones. Where had they lived before? How long had she and Rob known each other? Did he ever talk about traveling? He did, she said. Said he wanted to take her to Greece someday. I almost laughed. That was our dream. I still had the damn travel brochures in a drawer, stained with coffee and hope. She showed me a necklace he gave her once, a sapphire pendant. His favorite color, she said. I smiled again, told her it was lovely. I didn't tell her I had found the receipt for it buried in a box he never meant me to see. Hannah liked me. I helped her rewrite her college essay. I complimented her music taste. I told her she reminded me of my daughter, though I never had one. She asked me once if I had kids. I said yes. One son. He lived far away. She nodded like she understood. Dads are complicated, she said. I didn't answer. Eric was quieter, kept to himself. But he was polite, thanked me every time I dropped by. He looked nothing like Robert, but he acted like him. That easy charm. The way he held eye contact just a little too long, like it was a tactic. I watched him closely, and I saw it, the same way of speaking that made you feel special even when he was saying nothing at all. I spent 3 months inside their lives. All the while I was building something behind the scenes. I hired a lawyer, a quiet one, someone who specialized in financial tracing and civil reclamation. We worked in secret. I brought him files, copies of account statements, mortgage papers, signatures I never gave. He ran the numbers, followed the trails. We found 3 trust accounts, one in Susan's name, one in Hannah's, one set up for Eric's future business venture, whatever that was supposed to be, all linked back to accounts Robert had drained from our savings, retirement, and insurance policies. He'd even borrowed against the annuity I'd set up for our son. Legally, it was murky. Morally, it was poison. But there were enough fingerprints to make a case. That's when I began calling it the casserole plan. Because the beauty of casseroles is that they seem harmless. They're warm, familiar, comforting. They ask for nothing in return. They make people trust you. And that's what I needed. Trust. Access. Time. I didn't want to storm the gates. I wanted to own the land. Quietly. Completely. And that started with her house. What Susan didn't know, what Robert had hidden from both of us, was that he'd put my name on the deed. As co-owner. A form of asset protection probably. But in doing so, he gave me leverage. Legal hard leverage. My lawyer filed a claim. Sent a letter. The paperwork had already started moving. And soon they would know. But I still brought one more pie. Blueberry this time. I wanted to see her one last time before it changed. Susan opened the door, smiling. She looked tired. Told me she hadn't been sleeping well. I told her it would pass. Everything does. She touched my wrist before I left and said, "Thank you for being here. You remind me of someone. I just can't think who." I smiled. I get that a lot. The first time Susan called me crying, I didn't answer. I watched the phone ring from across the room, her name blinking on the screen like a siren. I let it buzz itself silent. She left a message, soft, panicked, barely holding it together. I got this letter," she said. "I don't understand. It says the deed's in someone else's name? That you're Margaret." Her voice cracked then, like the syllables had cut her from the inside out. I played the message twice. Then I deleted it. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't afford to feel just yet. Not until everything he took was back where it belonged. Legally, it was airtight. Robert had named me as joint owner years ago, probably for tax reasons or to keep it hidden from scrutiny. But it gave me full claim. The lawyer said we had every right to proceed. It may get emotional, he warned. I nodded. Let them have their emotions, I said. I've had mine. Now it's my turn to act. I signed the paperwork. We initiated the transfer of ownership. The house would revert to me in 30 days unless contested. And I knew she wouldn't contest it. Because to fight, you have to believe you're entitled. She never was. She just didn't know it until now. I arrived a week later. Not with a pie. Not with casseroles. This time I carried a clipboard and a key. Susan opened the door slowly. Her face had changed. There were shadows under her eyes. Her cardigan was wrinkled, and she looked 10 years older than the woman I'd been feeding for 3 months. She didn't speak at first. Just stared at me like I was a ghost she'd seen too many times in her dreams. I told her we needed to talk. She let me in. The living room still smelled like lemon cleaner and lavender, my recipe. A scent I'd left behind like breadcrumbs. Eric wasn't home. Hannah sat on the stairs, pale and silent. She didn't look surprised to see me. Just hollow. Like she already knew what was coming. I'm not here to hurt you, I said. I'm just here to take back what's mine. Susan's lips parted, but no sound came out. I handed her a copy of the deed. Highlighted her name. Highlighted mine. He signed this 6 years ago. Used my name. My credit. My marriage. To buy you this house. You've lived in it. Thrived in it. Built your family in it. And I paid for every single square inch. I didn't know, she whispered. I believe you, I said. And I meant it. But belief doesn't cancel debt. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't rebuild the trust that was siphoned through hidden bank accounts and lies sweetened with poetry. But he knew. And he chose you anyway. While I was in a hospital bed, he was building this. I paused. He left this place to you like it was a gift. But it wasn't his to give. Susan collapsed into the chair like her bones had surrendered. Where will we go? That's not my decision, I said gently. I'm not putting you out today. You have 30 days. I won't fight you for that. But after that, this house comes back to me. You can contest it if you want. She shook her head.
No.
No, I can't. Not now. Not after. She stopped. You always said he made perfect scrambled eggs, I said. That was my recipe. He watched me make them for 20 years before he copied it for you. Silence. Then she said something I didn't expect. I didn't know he could do that. Love like that. I thought I was the only one who brought it out in him. I didn't laugh. I didn't scream. I just looked at her and said, he loved himself. We were just mirrors. Later, Hannah followed me out. She was trembling but composed. Why did you come into our lives like that? Pretend. I turned to her. I never pretended. She blinked. I cared for you. I saw the best in you. I gave you time, patience, advice. You don't owe me anything for that. But the truth is, your father built a world on someone else's back. And that someone was me. She looked down. He told us he was married once, but that it ended. That it was broken. I leaned close gently so only she could hear.
No.
It wasn't broken. It was used. And then I said the most painful thing of all. He was different with me. And with you. And with her. None of it was false. But none of it was whole either. That night, I returned to the house I once shared with him. I stepped through the door with a key that still fit. Every surface gleamed. Every room held memory like a scent that never faded. I wandered through the kitchen, touched the counter where I'd rolled pie dough, where I'd written grocery lists he never read. I sat in his chair. I opened the cabinet where we kept the mugs and found his favorite one, the chipped blue ceramic with the faded skyline on it. He used to say it reminded him of their honeymoon in Chicago, but we never honeymooned there. That mug came from her. I took it out, smashed it on the floor. It didn't feel like rage. Felt like inventory. He left her a letter. That's what Susan said when she came to the house. It had been 2 weeks since I reclaimed it. I was sitting in the sunroom, the one I'd remodeled the year after I finished chemo, the one he never thanked me for. She stood on the front porch holding a yellow envelope like it might bite her. Her hands were shaking. He left this with the lawyer. Said to give it to me if anything ever happened. Her voice sounded like ash, crumbled, colorless, barely clinging to form. She handed it to me. You should read it. I didn't want to. That's the truth. I'd spent months scraping the last of him off me like dried wax. But I opened it anyway. The handwriting was unmistakable. Crisp, neat, with that leftward lean that made everything look like it was bracing for impact. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't love. It was logistics. Instructions. Financial passwords. Emergency contacts. A note to Hannah and Eric about staying in school. Keeping a low profile. Maintaining plausible deniability. If anything came under review. There was a line about Margaret's name being on the deed. Low risk, no suspicion. That was all I needed to see. He planned it, I said. Susan sat down across from me like the wind had been taken out of her lungs. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't. I thought he was protecting us. He was protecting himself. I slid the letter across the table. You were the beneficiaries. I was the collateral. She nodded, slow, defeated. Her face had thinned. She looked like someone in withdrawal. He was so good at making me feel chosen, she said. I used to think that meant something. It did, I said. To you. That's what makes this so cruel. It wasn't fake. Just fractional. He gave each of us exactly what we needed from him and nothing more. Do you hate me? She asked. I thought about that for a long time. No, I said eventually. Because you're not the one who looked me in the eye for 40 years and told me I was his whole world. You're not the one who held my hand while I bled out pieces of myself, so he could stay standing. You were just the one who got what I paid for. She broke down then, quiet, broken sobs, like glass cracking beneath a pillow. And I let her. I didn't reach for her. Didn't offer water. Didn't say it was okay. Because it wasn't. And some things should be hard to breathe through. That night I got a call from my son. He'd heard about the house. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, voice tight. Why'd I have to find out from Hannah? I closed my eyes. Because I didn't want you to try and stop me. He went quiet. Then, you're not the only one who lost him, Mom. No, I said. But I'm the only one who lost herself for him. There was a long silence. Then he asked, would you have forgiven him if he were still here? I didn't answer right away. I looked at the wall across from me, the one where our wedding photo used to hang. It was blank now. Clean. Like he'd never touched it. If it had been me, I asked, and I'd done what he did, would you have forgiven me? He didn't respond. That told me everything. The next morning Hannah showed up. She was wearing black. Not like mourning but armor. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes were dry. I want answers, she said. And I want them from you. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table. She crossed her arms. Was he a monster? No, I said. He was a man. That's worse in some ways. Monsters are easier to hate. He loved me, she said, almost daring me to contradict her. I know. That's what made it all so efficient. She flinched. You think I'm just a side effect? No. I think you're the unintended consequence of someone who thought he could have everything and never pay the bill. I didn't ask for this. Neither did I. She stood up, pacing. Her hands trembled. He told me you were sick. That it was over. That he didn't love you anymore. I laughed. Not bitterly. Just hollow. He made me tea every morning while I vomited blood. He read me T.S. Eliot and kissed the back of my neck when I thought I wasn't a woman anymore. He tucked blankets around my feet and told me I was still the love of his life. Then he left the house to you. So tell me, which version do you believe? She didn't answer. She was crying now and trying not to let it show. He was everything to me, she whispered. I nodded. He was everything to everyone. That was his gift. And his disease. Then I walked her to the door. I don't expect you to understand, I said. But one day when someone breaks you and smiles while doing it, remember this moment. And remember that I let you keep your name, your education, and your future. He gave you those things. But I let you keep them. She left without a word. That night I packed the last of his things into donation bags. His cufflinks. His cologne. The poetry notebooks he said were private. I kept one thing. The blue shirt I wore when he brought me home from my final radiation treatment. Not because it reminded me of him, but because it reminded me of me. The me who still believed. The me who survived. I placed it in the back of my closet and closed the door. The house was mine again, but it no longer smelled like betrayal. It smelled like fresh paint. I kept the house, but I emptied it. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just one drawer at a time, like peeling off layers of someone else's skin. I started with the medicine cabinet. Threw away expired ointments, half-used pill bottles, old razors. Then the nightstand drawers, his watch, his bookmarks, the tiny rock he used to carry for luck. Then the closet. I'd already donated most of his clothes, but there were still pieces that clung like ghosts. His wedding suit, his slippers, the sweater I once cried into the night before surgery. I folded them gently. Not because I missed him. Because I wanted to release me from them. The house didn't feel like a home anymore, but it didn't feel like a shrine either. It was something in between, a neutral zone like the blank page before the next chapter. I painted the kitchen. I replaced the curtains. I bought a new set of mugs, all plain white. I planted tulips in the backyard not because he liked them, he didn't, but because I did. The soil was stubborn and the ground fought me, but I dug anyway. My knees ached. My back spasmed. I bled from one hand after slipping on the trowel. I laughed. For the first time in months I laughed. Felt like penance. And it felt clean. Susan didn't contest the deed. 30 days passed and she moved. I didn't ask where. She left a voicemail, soft, trembling, full of half-finished sentences. I deleted it before it finished. I couldn't carry her grief anymore. I had enough of my own. Hannah sent me a thank you card, and signed. No return address. It said for the words. And the restraint. I tucked it in the back of the last poetry notebook, and put it in a box marked keep. I didn't want the poems. But I wanted the proof that I'd finally become the woman who could close the book without needing the ending to change. One morning, I walked to the river. I took his ashes in the urn they'd sent from the funeral home. Cheap, gray, utilitarian. He hadn't wanted anything fancy. That's what he told the lawyer. But I didn't honor his wishes. I didn't scatter him by the lake where we'd taken anniversary photos. I didn't bury him beside his parents. I didn't keep him on the mantle. I walked to a river we never visited, in a town he never knew, on a road he never traveled. I stood on the bank, the wind biting at my cheeks, and unscrewed the lid. I loved you, I said, more than you ever deserved. But I survived you. And now I don't owe you anything. Then I tilted the urn. The ashes didn't fall like dust. They clumped, heavy and reluctant, as if even now he didn't want to let go. But I shook the last of him out, watched the current take him downstream, slow, steady, without ceremony. And I turned around. I didn't look back. Back at the house, I cleaned the kitchen one last time. I left the windows open. Let the air move through everything. It no longer smelled like lemon cleaner or grief. It smelled like fresh wood and tulips and paint. Like something new. Something mine. That evening, I sat on the porch with tea in my new white mug. A real estate listing was pulled up on my phone. A small cottage by the sea. Blue shutters. Tiny garden. Enough space for a single life lived deeply. The listing agent had called it humble but peaceful. I liked that. Humble felt honest. Peaceful felt earned. I called the number. Scheduled a visit. Didn't tell anyone. Just made the plan. Because I gave him 40 years. And now I was giving myself what was left. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that reclaiming your life is possible, even after betrayal. Subscribe for more confessional, slow burn stories of revenge and redemption told from the inside out. New stories drop daily, and each one goes deeper. See you soon in the next one.